40 children lie in their beds, total silence. The curtains are drawn in the middle of the day, but the room is bright anyway. No one is truly asleep, yet everyone lies motionless. Half of them aren't sleeping at all. Some toss from side to side. Someone stares at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the whitewash. No one is allowed to get up, not allowed to sit up, not even allowed to turn over too sharply, because somewhere over by the door sits the caretaker and her hearing is tuned to the slightest movement. Many of them aren't tired and don't want to sleep, but they'll lie like this for almost 2 more hours. Every day, 5 days a week, 3, sometimes 4 years in a row. It was called the quiet hour, and if you want to understand how a vast country raised millions of obedient, disciplined citizens accustomed to falling in line, don't start with the army, don't start with the factory or the party meeting. Start right here, in a room that smells of food from the cafeteria down in the basement and of a mop that reeks of floor cleaner. At the age when a child still can't tie his own shoelaces, but already knows for certain, there is a time when you are required to lie still even if you don't want to. Now let's rewind to the start of this day, because by the time the quiet hour comes, half the day at the kindergarten has already been lived. Morning at a Soviet kindergarten began in darkness, real, wintry, impenetrable darkness. Say it's 1985, a town somewhere in the country's heartland, 7 in the morning, minus 20 Celsius. The parents, both of them working, because in the Soviet Union, a stay-at-home mother was a nearly impossible thing, haul their half-asleep child out of bed, wrap him in 3 layers of clothing, and lead him across the frozen yard toward a long 2-story building, its windows full of the warm glow of incandescent bulbs. Inside, a cloakroom, rows of little low lockers, each with a picture, a cherry, a mushroom, a bunny. A child knew his own locker not by his name. He couldn't read yet, but by the picture. For the rest of his life, a person might remember, I was the mushroom, and I was the cherry. The mother kisses her child, turns and walks away. For the whole day, until evening. And for some children, not even until evening, because there was a special kind of kindergarten called the 5-day. A child was brought there Monday morning and picked up Friday evening. He lived there all week, slept, ate, played, got sick, cried at night, without his parents. Mothers and fathers with grueling shift work, business trips, or simply not enough strength left would leave their 3- and 4-year-olds at the kindergarten for 5 days straight. And this wasn't considered cruelty. It was considered normal. The state took the child almost entirely upon itself, and in that lay the whole philosophy. It isn't the family that raises a citizen. The collective raises him. But let's come back to the more common arrangement, where children are picked up in the evening. So, the day at kindergarten is only just beginning. The first thing that happens after the cloakroom is the inspection. A nurse or a caretaker peers down each child's throat, feels his forehead, sometimes checks his head. The reason is simple and utterly unsentimental. When there are 30 children in one room, any infection spreads like wildfire. The sick were turned back and sent home. The healthy were let inside into the group, which was the name for both the room itself and the collective of children who spent every day from start to finish inside it. 30 children, 1, at most 2, caretakers, and a helper, the nanny, who mopped the floors, carried out the meals, wiped noses, and even emptied the chamber pots. In the younger groups, there were no toilets. Next came exercises, and here begins what today would be called extreme. A great many Soviet kindergartens practiced a genuine cult of hardening. The idea went like this: to coddle a child is a crime, but to accustom him to cold and exertion is a blessing. In practice, this meant children doing their morning gymnastics in nothing but underpants and undershirts, sometimes barefoot, with the window cracked open. And then came the moment that an entire generation of former Soviet children remembers with a shudder: breakfast. Picture semolina porridge. For those who didn't grow up on it, It's a milk porridge made from semolina, something between custard and wallpaper paste. Made properly, it's tender. Made in an industrial cauldron for 30 portions, it forms a crust and turns lumpy. And those lumps were the worst part for the children. The kind of thing that, once they were grown, could bring a lump to their own throats at the mere words semolina porridge. And then the skin, that thin, warm, slimy film that forms on the surface of boiled milk, cocoa, or kissel. It clung to your lips, to your spoon, to your tongue. A huge number of children physically could not swallow it without a spasm of disgust. You don't leave the table until your plate is empty. A child could sit over cold porridge for 20 minutes, half an hour, choking back tears, while the others had already gone off to play. The caretaker was no villain. She sincerely believed she was doing what was best. The child must finish. The child must grow strong. Individual taste, nausea, revulsion, these were whims, and whims are not encouraged in a collective. In Western child-rearing of those same years, think of Dr. Spock's bestsellers in America, the child was a person to be listened to. In the Soviet kindergarten, the child was a unit of the collective to be shaped. There's a story that former pupils tell. There was a young, beautiful caretaker who loved one little girl very much. The smallest in the group carried her in her arms, played with her separately. And one of the adults filed a complaint, not for harshness, for tenderness, for singling out one child above all the rest. Singling out one was not allowed. Love was meant to be distributed equally, like lumpy semolina porridge. After breakfast came lessons, and here appears the thing the entire system, at its core, was built for. The children sat down at their little low tables, and what were called developmental activities began. Drawing, modeling clay, counting, poems, songs. All perfectly sweet, but between the bunnies and the mushrooms, between draw a house and sculpt a gingerbread man, something else was being planted in those little heads. On the wall of the group there almost always hung a portrait, Lenin. They were told that he too had once been a little curly-haired boy, just like them, and that he grew up and made all people free and happy. It wasn't presented as politics, it was presented as a fairy tale. Here it's important to be precise. Children became little Octobrists, the youngest tier of the Communist Children's Organization, with a little red star on the chest. Not in kindergarten, but in the first grade of school at age 7. The badge and the oath, that's school already, but the ground for all of it was prepared right there in kindergarten. Long before the little star badge, a child already knew who was in the portrait, already knew the songs about the motherland, already knew he would live in the best, most just country on earth. No one lied to his face, they simply never showed him that things could be otherwise, and no one told him about the flaws. And why would he need to know about that? How much did all of this cost the parents? Almost nothing. The fee for a Soviet kindergarten was tied not to the actual costs, but to the family's income. The less the parents earned, the less they paid. On average, across the country, it came to somewhere around 8 to 12 rubles a month per child, against an average salary of somewhere around 180 to 200 rubles. This was a drop in the bucket. Compare that to the modern United States, where a spot in daycare easily eats up $1,000 to $1,500 a month and becomes one of the largest lines in the family budget. The Soviet system took a child off its parents' hands for the entire day, fed him, treated him, taught him, and raised him for the price of a couple of trips to the store. Closer to midday, the children were taken outside for a walk. In any weather, -20, we walk. Wind, we walk. There was an official notion of the temperature at which a walk gets cancelled, but the bar was set very low. The children were bundled into so much clothing that their arms wouldn't lower to their sides and were let out onto the yard. A fenced-off patch with a canopy shaped like a mushroom, a sandbox buried under snow, and wooden slides. 30 identical fur cocoons waddled through the frost. Someone would fall and be unable to get back up on his own, like an overturned turtle. And this, by the way, was wonderful in its own way. Fresh air, snow, the first snowman, the first friendship, the first secret whispered in an ear. Here, friendships were formed that were sometimes remembered for a lifetime. The kindergarten was not a prison. That's exactly where the whole difficulty lies. Then, lunch, soup, a main course, stewed dried fruit compote. And once again, the law of the clean plate. And once again, someone sits over cooling soup with a boiled apart onion floating in it, unable to swallow. By this point in the day, the child is already dead tired, and this is where the thing we began with arrives. The quiet hour. The curtains are drawn. Out come the folding cots, sometimes set edge to edge, row against row, 30 of them in a single sleeping room. The children are laid down, tucked in, and the order, sleep. The trouble is that sleeping on command is impossible. Half the children really did pass out from exhaustion. The other half lay with open eyes, waging that same quiet, invisible war, the war of a child who doesn't want to sleep against a system that demands he sleep. Anyone who broke the rule might be pulled up, scolded in front of everyone, stood in the corner, or, worst of all, at that age, shamed, told that he alone was the bad one, while all the others were good and sleeping. It was the first rehearsal in life of a very grown-up skill, doing not what you feel, but what you're supposed to. No one conceived of this as cruelty. The caretakers needed a break too. After the quiet hour came the afternoon snack. Kefir, a biscuit or a bun, warm milk with that very same skin. The children were dressed again, taken out to walk again if it wasn't too dark, and then came the longest, most drawn-out stretch of the day, the waiting for the parents. The children sat by the window and watched the yard, the darkness, where under the yellow lamplight, familiar coated silhouettes appeared one by one. And every time the door to the group opened, 30 heads turned at once. For me? And 30 times? No, not for me, for someone else. To be the last one picked up is a particular, sharp childhood grief. The emptying group, the tired caretaker already glancing at the clock, the darkness outside the window, among the empty lockers of others with their mushrooms and cherries, and then, at last, her, Mama, and all the exhaustion, all the lumps in the porridge, all 2 hours of stillness burn away instantly in a single embrace in the doorway. Ask anyone who went through a Soviet kindergarten whether he was happy there, and you will almost never hear a flat no. You'll hear that damned lumpy semolina porridge, and in the same breath, but remember the smell of the New Year's tree. Remember how we were friends, the system that snuffed out the separate I in a child gave him at the same time the very thing many people lack their whole lives, the sense that you are part of something big, warm, and shared. It took away freedom and gave back belonging in return. Here's what I find worth asking you. If you were offered this, a full day of care, food, a doctor, teachers, friends, the sense that your child is part of a big collective, and all of it almost free. But in exchange, the state, not you, decides when he sleeps, what he eats, and what he believes. Would you agree to it? And where, in your view, is the line beyond which caring for a child turns into remaking him?